Welcome to Startup Spokane, where hosts Steve Traben and Megan Halsey explore the excitement and momentum growing throughout Spokane's expanding startup community. Startup Spokane is a joint effort between Greater Spokane Incorporated's Startup Spokane, our friends at Well Dressed Walrus, and Spokane Talks Online. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Megan.
Welcome to Startup Spokane on Spokane Talks Online, your podcast home for everything startup and entrepreneurship related in the Spokane region. I'm your host, Steve Traben, along with me, Megan Halsey. And Startup Spokane is a program of Greater Spokane Incorporated, and we're here to provide you with our region's story of entrepreneurship and educate you about the resources that exist in our region's ecosystem. We want to share ways for you to plug in and connect with those resources so that if you are launching or growing your business, you have what you need to be successful. We're really excited to have our guests here today. Megan, you want to introduce them for us?
I sure do. One of our most important partners for Startup Spokane is, of course, our parent organization, Greater Spokane Incorporated. And they have a number of initiatives that they work with to help grow our region, both on the entrepreneurship and business side. And one of those programs that they work with is Vision 2030. And so today we're joined by two guests to talk about Vision 2030. First, I would like to introduce Stacia Rasmussen. She is the Vision 2030 Business Development Manager, and Frank Velazquez, Chair of the Vision 2030 Board. If you could both take a moment and introduce yourselves, that would be fantastic.
Great. Thank you. My name's Stacia Rasmussen. I work for GSI as the Business Development Manager for Vision 2030. Been with them for about a year and have really enjoyed this particular career in my life. We are looking to develop Spokane into a very major hub, the region as well as the county and the city, into a life science hub, specifically around economic development, taking advantage of all of our great assets that we have here.
Great. And Dr. V?
So good morning, everybody. So Frank Velazquez, and I'm a physician by training and a physician executive by career choice for the last 15 years or so. So I'm the co-chair of Vision 2030, and prior to that, I was a CEO of PAML. Have been in all three worlds of academia, clinical, as well as the business side. And I'm looking forward to moving Spokane into a place of prominence in the life sciences, as I think we have a great opportunity based on the investments of many over the many years. So happy to be here today.
No, that's great. And so let's jump into Vision 2030. Let's provide our listeners and viewers with some context for what it is and sort of the mission of the vision. One of you want to take that on?
Simple baseline.
Yeah. Well, it is actually, like Dr. Velazquez mentioned, it started many, many, many years ago. I would say we're probably the third or fourth iteration of this effort, all starting really with the university district development and creating that as a higher ed campus, and then focusing on the sciences programs of multiple universities that exist there. This effort of Vision 2030, the name implies that historical studies show that taking advantage of all of our healthcare systems and our life science industry has a huge economic impact for the area. Mm-hmm. And we are striving to achieve those goals by the year 2030, if not sooner.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and you want to just talk about, you can throw out the number. What is the goal? What is the economic impact goal for 2030?
We actually are looking at up to a 9% increase in GDP by 2030, as well as about 9,000 new higher paying jobs in the area.
So we've got two med schools here. We've got 7 colleges and universities within 75 miles of Spokane, an incredible medical district. Is this the nexus of all of those? Frank, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think, as Stacia mentioned, this is a continuum. And in order for you to be significant in the life sciences, you need education. You need health and medical education, and then you need an entrepreneurial spirit in the community, because the life sciences economic impact comes out of mainly research, discovery, and innovation that can be commercialized, which is really difficult to do unless you have all of the components that I already mentioned. So this community very intentionally and strategically for the last 20, 30 years has been building around that thought process that if we aggregate education on the life sciences or the health sciences, and the reason for that is because we have a very strong healthcare delivery core.
Right.
Now, if you look at Spokane, for our size, we have about 2.5 times the size of healthcare delivery that we need. But the reason why that is so is because we're a regional referral center. So we attract from surrounding communities and surrounding states. So we have between 2 and 2.5 million people that derive benefit from our healthcare services a year, which is much bigger than the actual population of Spokane. So the thought process was, can we build a halo using that and medical education into an economic engine? And that's where Vision 2030, as the third leg of this relay, comes in to move it to the place where we started the development, innovation, and commercialization that will lead to startups, newer companies, newer industries, critical mass, and that critical mass will become a magnet. That is the concept behind Vision 2030.
That's great. Well
So
said.
with Vision 2030, you guys said that you wanted to achieve a 9% increase in GDP. What was the starting point for that, and where are you today? How close are you to that goal, and what actions are you taking to move us further down that road?
So actually, it's been an interesting journey for about a year and a half or 2 years now. And the reason why I say that is because first thing we had to define is what is that we as a community have skill sets and what is that we're good at. And what that basically means is not what we think we're good at, but how can we demonstrate quantitatively that we're good at something. So one of the first steps that we undertook in the last 18 months or so, we did a full inventory of companies, employees, research, patents, real quantifiable data that allows us to say in the community of Spokane, in the greater expanded community of Spokane, we actually are good at these 3 or 4 things, and we have the critical mass to demonstrate that we can grow that. So that in and of itself was a significant effort. I can tell you I've been in a lot of other communities, and we probably have built the most comprehensive database that we own as a community. It's not a consultant, we own it. That allows us to really slice and dice data so we can at any point in time say, if we're talking about biomaterials, where are we? And we can tell you exactly where we are. So we have translated that into a number of segments that we're pursuing, and we're pursuing those segments in a very tactical way. As an example, we are headed to the Bio Conference in June, which is the largest life sciences conference in the world, at least in the US, but it's actually an international conference. And our goal is to connect specifically with other participants in the industry where we may have an affinity, to try to attract some of their growth to the Spokane area.
Yeah, so it's part of a recruitment strategy?
That is correct.
Okay.
So we have internal and external. And internal, we're continuing to grow what we have. We're building bridges between the various segments of the industry and the various market segments, where we're talking about health IT, or we're talking about biomaterials, infectious diseases, it doesn't matter, we're building bridges, but we also have an eye towards external recruitment to complement here. And for example, bio, which is very tactical on our part, is where we're going to accomplish all of that.
So tell me, what do you identified as the strengths of this community? What types of businesses specifically are you trying to recruit from bio?
Sure. So there's tangible and then there's intangibles. And I won't spend a lot of time on the intangibles because we've all heard about all the wonderful things about this community. And those of us that come from the outside actually probably appreciate it even more than people that have been here their whole life. But we have a intangible asset that we need to call out. And that is, this community has a unique collaborative style that is really, 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 really hard to find other places. And that has significant market value because it's easier to do business here. And that translates into time and money for industry. So as we looked at the areas where we have skill set, specifically research with the potential for clinical trials, commercialization, new products, services, or devices, we have a significant strength in cancer, infectious diseases, and what we call diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and the whole spectrum of cardiovascular disease, etc. But we also have complementary strengths in adjacent markets such as health IT, bioengineering, and small device manufacturing. So we're going to focus on those areas.
Wow, and you have an enormous committee focused on Vision 2030. I think one of the largest committees that I've seen in this region. Right? Talk a little bit about the composition of the committee. We have just a few minutes before we go to break, and just help our listeners understand kind of what brawn is behind all of this.
Sure. It has been an exciting journey, as you said, but the committee participants are all volunteers, and they really comprise all of the leaders in the industry, leaders in the institution, that have the skill set and the background and the experience to help us identify the best strategies to accomplish these goals. We really value their time. They all have full-time jobs, and they contribute as they can. We convene quite often. We have a governance structure that is approximately 20 individuals that meets once a month, and then 4 different committees that comprise the education. We have an infrastructure. We have a bioscience business development and research, and then we have the branding and marketing. There's crossover, as you can imagine, across all 4 of those committees. So we make sure there's consistency across them all, of which I'm hoping to fill that connection quite often. But out of that, we've made some pretty decent progress against strategies and even potential solutions that we'll meet.
And there's over 80 people that
100,
comprise.
over 100.
There's over 100 now.
Yeah, and so
Committee.
there, and this is how
committee.
you're able to attack such a large initiative. I mean,
Right.
it's one of those
Yeah.
things that really takes a village. And when we come back after our break, I want to talk a little more about kind of the ecosystem side of things and how our ecosystems that we're working on with Startup Spokane and entrepreneurship, how that is completely aligned with the work that you're doing in a much more targeted way. We're having a great conversation with Dr. Velazquez and Stacia Rasmussen about Vision 2030, an incredible initiative that's going to drive enormous economic impact in our region. Stay with us. We'll be right back on Startup Spokane on Spokane Talks Online.
They say it takes a community to raise a family. It also takes one to build a business. I came to Spokane 12 years ago as a Whitworth student, and I planned to leave after graduation. But the more I got to know this community, the more I wanted to become a part of it. My husband and I have built our business in Spokane, and now we're raising our family here too. We operate a consulting company that provides creative business development strategies. Our approach is holistic and dependent on intentional connections and relationships. And no one understands connections and relationships better than GSI. They direct momentum towards investments in our community, provide resources that help business leaders connect, and they're dedicated and passionate about making Spokane great. GSI gives me the confidence to build my business here because they believe every organization, even a small one like mine, adds big value to our community. With GSI's help, Spokane will be a place my son will want to build his career too. I'm Eva Marquette, owner of Freshview. We're creating something greater with Greater Spokane Incorporated.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
Welcome back to Startup Spokane on Spokane Talks Online, where we're talking to Stacia Rasmussen and Dr. Frank Velazquez with Vision 2030. When we took our break, we were talking a little bit about milestones and where we were achieving, what they've achieved to date. And what we'd like to talk about now when we're back is, could you guys explain to us a little bit about where you're going and how are you going to execute to get that 9% GDP growth? It's a big goal.
It is.
So, but maybe I'll start and you can. So, one of the things that we have to remember is that a lot of preliminary steps were taken to get us to where we're at the point of execution, which includes the conversations about expanding medical education, getting the 2 medical education programs, getting the health sciences campuses built up, getting the scientists recruited with packages, came with support from HSSA and other places to get us to a point where we could actually say, now we can focus on being a life sciences hub. So every single month we have accomplished a different milestone, and without getting into a lot of the details, because when you have about 100 people working simultaneously,
there's a lot
to
report.
talk about.
Yep.
But what it boils down to, after at least a couple of friendly visits from communities that have been extremely successful, that have helped us validate our effort, we're ready to present to the outside world. Spokane is open for business as a life sciences hub. But in addition to that, now we're ready to support those entrepreneurs we have budding in our midst, a lot better than we did 3 years ago, a lot better than we did 5 years ago, because we have identified the physical facilities, the funding, the resources, the support that they need. All of that is part of those milestones. And you need to be very detailed to know exactly what is that you need to grow an ecosystem. And again, without boring you with the details, because we have hundreds of thousands of data lines, we have accomplished all of that, which now allows us to say, we're open for business. We want you to be here.
Right. And I would say this isn't all about recruitment, right?
Nope.
I mean, this is about growing our own because we have such a robust health sciences education system, this medical district that is larger than it needs to be. Research is occurring out of all of these places, right? So we have a lot of opportunity to innovate and commercialize right here in Spokane. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the possibilities around that?
So I think there are a number of contributing factors. We have several entities, organizations, and agencies that have been developed, like HSSA, Ignite Northwest, et cetera, that have been developed around this thought process, which now allows us to take a startup company and provide them with physical facility support and capital for that startup company to become the next billion-dollar company, hopefully. That's what we're all thinking about. But at the same time, by being able to aggregate some of this talent geographically, and I've always said that innovation needs a physical address, because you need to be able to point somewhere. By aggregating all of this talent around the university district and the growing other side of the bridge of the university district, you have scientists that perhaps were not aware of each other, talking to each other. We have scientists speaking with clinicians, clinicians speaking with engineers, engineers speaking with IT, et cetera, to have that halo effect of growth, which is the best way to actually develop an ecosystem. Targeted recruitment is helpful, but if you don't have that halo effect locally, which we have spent a fair amount of time trying to grow, you won't be successful, because you can't parachute a company in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, and you know, we've noticed from the startup side, a lot of that collaboration you're talking about, we're having a lot more of those researchers participate in startup events, wanting to learn more about alternative fundraising to go alongside, hand in hand with maybe grants and things that they're receiving through HSSA and other partner organizations. And we're also seeing a lot of those medical focused researchers coming to us and saying, I need help developing this delivery system. Do you have an engineer or somebody who can assist? And so it's been a really, the growth and the expansion of that collaboration has been really rapid in the last 3 to 6 months, particularly. So it's been really exciting. Now, Stacia, I think you guys are in the process of kind of rebranding yourselves as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like?
You betcha. We are looking to move away from the name of Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is a great name. It kind of gives us our time frame of when we're trying to accomplish this, but it really doesn't say what we're working on, right? So we wanted it to be fairly straightforward. It is potentially just an interim name, but we wanted to communicate ourselves as Life Sciences of Spokane.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to
okay,
be
great.
kind of changing that reference with Vision 2030 still attached to that, since that has become quite the name of it's still the name of the GSI initiative, but Life Science Spokane is really the industry of our region. And it is also very important to understand we're trying to connect all of the dots of everything that's already here in that industry as partnerships are all developing, as you spoke to, Megan, about everybody working together to achieve this. So it's more about connecting the dots and communicating that out of the entire industry.
That's really exciting. So, who do you guys work with? Who you see as leading the charge for that innovation hub that we need to build to make this an exciting place for companies to locate to? Do you have companies that you are working with that you think represent that initiative or goal?
So we have, I can tell you that first and foremost, our academic institutions are really taking the lead in identifying the researchers, and the innovation that they can contribute to and grow for the community, for this target. But we also have a handful, more than a handful of companies that are early stage, and some that are more mature, each one in different segments. For example, when you talk about health IT, we have a fairly mature segment, actually a very strong skill set. Right. When you talk about either biomaterials or others, we have 2 or 3 startups that we're working with. We also are looking at a regional effort in cancer, because to be attractive for cancer trials, as well as for cancer-related devices, you need to have a broad geography. So we have brought to the table all of the healthcare providers,
Right.
and all of the institutions that provide cancer care, but also all of the researchers that do cancer research. So it's a very large compendium of people and companies and organizations. And I think the best way to look at it is a network. Is almost like a neural network that is connected, and every time there's a pulse in one side, that ripples through the rest of the network,
Right.
and ignites a signal, no pun intended, over on some side that we were not even thinking about.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that brings then another collaboration that we can attach to that network. And our goal at Vision 2030, for some things we have led when it was necessary, for some things we convene, some things we collaborate, and some things we support. Example, we started with medical education. Well, now the medical schools need to lead, and we support them.
Right. So, Frank, what needs or gaps have you identified in the ecosystem specifically for Vision 2030? Because I know that in health sciences, I mean, there are some specific areas that a general ecosystem may not be positioned to provide support with or in. So as we're working to create a sandbox of support in our region for any kind of company, are there specific needs or gaps that you've already identified that we need to focus on as a region to fill? Or
So we've heard about 3 things that come up very often when we have these conversations, one of them being capital. And that's not uncommon. Actually, the fact that we have identified capital as a need is good, because it means we're growing and we're outpacing our availability of capital, which is actually a good problem to have. But that's number one. Number 2, appropriate physical facilities, and these are multi-purpose, multi-use, modular structures that you can be this type of lab today, that type of lab tomorrow.
It's more lab-oriented space.
It's more
right?
lab-oriented. And then I think thirdly, one of the things that we have heard is specific facilities that have a common purpose, like, for example, manufacturing of prototypes or manufacturing of devices that can be used for more than one thing. So we're looking at those 3 segments, and with the hope of growing all of them, starting with a lot more capital.
No, that's great. And I think it's important for us to know what those needs are, so we can focus on those together. And in the couple minutes we have remaining, what are your most specific things you're focused on in 2018? I know that you're rebranding Stacia. That's awesome. That's exciting news. Other specific goals or milestones for this year?
Well, The recent outcomes from a lot of this committee work has been, like I mentioned, the strategies and then proposed solutions. So understanding what some of those strategies are and the proposed solutions, I see kind of 2018 being, we're going to have kind of that same output from all of the committees, of which we want to aggregate all of those constraints, if you will, or challenges, and see if there's similarities across where there's overlap, where there's duplication, where there's gaps, and then be able to say which ones of these what solutions are going to solve the majority of those challenges across the board of the entire industry, and prioritize them. Then I see the next level really being, let's go back to the community and say, how do we want to actually task this work out and have it actually be accomplished step by step with those priorities in mind.
Good.
Yeah.
Sounds like project management.
Yes.
There's actually one item that I would like to mention
Sure.
that's very important to the community, and that comes out of our medical education, which is the expansion of clinical sites for medical education, as well as the expansion of graduate medical educations, so we can retain those physicians after they train. So that's one of those very targeted areas that we're working on.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a really exciting conversation with Dr. Velazquez and Stacia Rasmussen with Vision 2030, now branding as Life Sciences Spokane. And but unfortunately, we're all out of time for today. So I want to thank you for joining us at Startup Spokane at Spokane Talks Online, and just thanks for hearing about the story of entrepreneurship in the Inland Northwest, and we hope that you're going to join us for future broad and podcasts, and we will continue to bring you profiles of successful entrepreneurs, information about helpful resources, and so much more. Talk to you next time at Startup Spokane on Spokane Talks Online.
Startup Spokane is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is a joint effort between GSI's Startup Spokane, Well Dressed Walrus, and Spokane Talks Online. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. We wish you a great and profitable day.